Hey everyone, welcome to our fourth podcast. On this one, we're going to be discussing love and romance and all that good stuff from a spiritual perspective, whether or not it actually really is or can be spiritual, or how to have a relationship that helps you grow spiritually, all these type of topics. So just dive right into it. This is going to be an interesting one too, because it's going to be a bit of a debate because we don't all agree on this. And so I'm quite curious to see what everyone has to say. Um, Yeah, for me, I definitely think of romantic love as just being pretty much a fantasy for the most part, and that you can't really separate love and lust from a romantic point of view. It's going to be, this is why I think most of the stuff was always, go be celibate, be a monk, don't be with anyone, because then you can transcend it. But if you're basically with somebody, which is not bad, I mean, I think there still has to be children, there's still householders, so it's not like it's a negative, but I think that you can there's nothing inherently spiritual about it any more than anything else. I mean, anything you go through in life, good or bad, can be used to learn from and let things go, and then to become more spiritual, more or less, by through detachment fundamentally. And so that's kind of my 2 cents. So let's see what everyone else got has to say. Who'd like to go next?
I guess that'll be me then. All right. Well, first, I think there should be a little bit of just like definition of terms. Like love is very misunderstood, I think, especially spiritual love. When the New Testament of the Bible says that God is love, it's not saying that God is some kind of emotion, some kind of touchy feely emotion that people have. Um, so I think there's it's important to sort of differentiate between the emotional state, which is mostly like mating instincts in the human animal, and then there's just what is like the spiritual essence of love. And it seems to me that love, in a word, is acceptance. If you're open to something to the extent that you are open, that you don't have any barriers, there's no wall or door in between, then that could be called love. And there is a certain amount of love in the mating instincts. Even like a mother hen, tending to her chicks, there's a little spark of this just open-hearted acceptance in there that, I mean, you can call it the essence of divinity to some degree. I'm sure that there are some people, in addition to Christians, who would say that the highest principle is love. And so, I mean, love can be found just about anywhere, anything that you accept. And the opposite of love would be hate, apparently. I mean, that's just the standard opposite, which would just be rejection, just like shutting down, just no, get it away from me. So, love is acceptance and hate is rejection. And romantic love, I mean, there's real love in there. But also, I mean, it can be a spiritual practice. Just having a relationship can be a spiritual practice in a number of ways. Like you were saying, just anything can be a spiritual practice. Washing dishes can be a spiritual practice if you
Mhm.
go about it with the right mental states. You do it mindfully, for example. You're in the present moment, just experiencing what you're experiencing. Then that could be a kind of spiritual practice.
Well,
And
the thing, if I could just jump in real fast, 'cause I'm just curious. When it comes to like the acceptance thing, the main issue I always think about with that is the fact that it doesn't really tell you what you should be doing per se about that, right? Because you could love somebody, and if they're in jail or they're toxic or there's, they want to kill you, maybe you would still keep your distance or do whatever. So there's no follow up action in accordance with love. So I feel like, you know what I'm saying? If that makes sense. I mean, that's where I feel like, okay, I love them, but doesn't mean I should even be close to them or do this or do that. It would still all be based off of logic, I would think.
yeah, well, it's sort of like the way Buddhist ethics works is just it's not exactly what you do outwardly that is moral or immoral. It's just the mental states. If you do something with like a wholesome mental state, then it's moral. And if you do something with an unwholesome mental state, it's immoral. And certain
Mhm,
things, like killing somebody, is damn difficult to do with a wholesome mental state, unless maybe you're
mhm.
doing it, purely accidentally.
Listen to the Bhagavad Gita. Unless you're in a war, spiritual war for the fate of humanity,
Yeah,
then you're good.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think with regard to romantic love, that one of the spiritual practices of it is just interacting at close range with another person who's not going to always be doing what you like. And it's not even necessarily that they're going to be making troubles or picking fights. I mean, they just might cook for dinner something that you don't like very much, something like that. And it's just all this, it's grist for the mill, like Ram Dass would say. It's just you just learn to, accept it with equanimity. To some degree, it can even be like an ascetic practice, just the male mind and the female mind that I mean, it's kind of strange that we've evolved to form this symbiosis of male and female to create, a family in the next generation and so forth. But still, there's a certain amount of friction that just seems built into it. It's like women identify more with their feelings. They're more, um, as a general rule, statistically more insecure. More worried about this and that, and men prefer freedom to security. Women prefer security to freedom. And so there's a certain amount of friction going on. And just accepting that and dealing with it with an open heart is a kind of ascetic practice, it seems to me, or at least it has been for me.
Mhm.
So that'd be just one simple way that it could be a spiritual practice. There's one really good example of like a serious spiritual practice that's not even the highest level, and that's in Dostoevsky's novel, The Brothers Karamazov, where you've
Mhm.
got Alyosha, who is the Karamazov brother who represents the spiritual aspect of the human being, and he's betrothed to this girl who's not only a complete basket case, but she's demon possessed besides. I mean, she is just a mess. And he just knowingly and willingly is going to marry this girl. And his guru, his starets, the father Zosima, who's like his spiritual guru, encourages this because he knows that there's going to be like massive karma being worked out through this.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's not ideal in a romantic relationship. Certainly not, but that is one possible way that any kind of intimate relationship with another person where you're just accepting them through thick and through thin no matter what. Just getting as close to unconditional love as you can, because true spiritual love would be unconditional. And it's relatively rare in the human race. I mean, in romantic love tends to be pretty conditional. I'll love you so long as you're faithful, or there's these conditions added. Whereas I think the closest the average human gets to like real spiritual unconditional love would be like a mother's love for her children.
Mhm.
She loves her kids whether they're beautiful or ugly, whether they're smart or stupid, whether they're good or bad. Sometimes even the bad kids get more love because the mother feels that they need it more or something. But
Mhm.
there's still the condition that it's her kid, so it's still not really pure unconditional love, but that's about as close as the average person gets, I think. But romantic love, I mean, once you've picked a person that you're confident that you can be compatible with, and that they're not gonna dish out anything that's just beyond your capacity to accept, once you've found the person you consider to be the right person, and then you make vows, for example, in the presence of God, supposedly, then it seems like it's your moral duty to just do it, just go
Yeah,
through with it.
I want to get into that whole right person thing, but I think let's let you Ship of Fools and Sunny kind of go get a couple words in.
Yeah.
Um, what do you guys think?
Um, yeah, I think clarity on the definitions is important. I don't think love is the thing sold to us by society or by Hollywood. That is something uh, fun, enjoyable, beautiful. I mean, these things might be going on which may turn into love, but I don't think that's it. I feel um, love is not something we can turn on. It's already there, and it's just kind of accessing it. Um, and so I do feel love is our true nature, but it's our true nature when it's expressed through feelings. And so that's how our essence manifests on the level of feelings. Um, whereas through the mind, it might be truth, and through perceptions, it might be beauty. Through feelings, it's love. So it comes down, for lack of a better word, from the source, which I believe is pure consciousness and permeates all the different levels of a being. And I think there's also these biochemical responses that you get such as oxytocin. But ultimately, the source of all of these things is something that's not objective. Almost like it's like purely subjective, and something we can't really describe. When we have that feeling of love, it's not, and strip it back of all of its conceptual baggage. It's something we can't really describe, and I feel if we try to describe it, we really are taking something away from it. Um, and I think when we feel genuine love for someone or something, in the deepest sense, it's an experience of shared being. And so, um, relationships, I feel as in ignorance, when we're a separate self, we go out into the world and we try and become whole again through objects or people or experiences. And one of the ways that we try to recover this feeling of wholeness is through relationships. Usually we're attracted to the opposite, whether it's opposite. It doesn't have to be opposite sex, but usually there's something in the other person that we don't have, and that we feel like we need it to feel whole. And I feel like this is like almost our spirit's desire for union. And when we get it, the feeling comes across as if there is no other. As we said, it feels almost like acceptance or empathy or embodiment. Also, I feel like you can love like a tree or a landscape. There's like a mysterious connection there. It's all kind of divine expression. So yeah, that's what I feel love is. It's not the thing that Hollywood or society leads us to believe, that there's this constant interaction and there's fireworks. I think in truly loving relationships, there's actually a lot of silence and presence, and you can't really show that in a movie or an advertisement. So that's my opinion.
When I was thinking about this, I had a ton of trouble, purely because I think that it's such a wide word, like in terms of specificity. It's just, I almost found it like I was approaching it from like 15 different angles. Like you could look at love from the perspective of just pure like a biochemical angle. You could look at it from a psychological or psychotherapeutic angle. You could look at it from, like maybe like how Manu is from like a more like red pilled aware kind of angle, like a little not cynical, but maybe just a bit more realistic about how romantic love is, which is probably more what I'm inclined to think, and being a little bit more specific in the way that I like to use language. I tend to view it as like a bit more of a biochemical process, and obviously there's something going on there. If it is occurring in reality, it is something. But I just had so much trouble trying to nail down even what I thought the definition of this thing, love, was. And I know it gets used in ancient texts and things like that as well. But I'm not going to lie, like this topic is difficult to talk about, I think, because there's so many different angles you could approach it from. Like you could approach it from like a general metaphysical perspective, or like and I think this is where the danger comes in discussing it, is because in our civilization, as Sunny pointed out, like we have all sorts of infantile acculturated notions of what love is, that are in our culture, which is the Hollywood thing and all that kind of stuff. And it's just so tied up with baggage that I don't know. I had trouble analyzing the whole thing, to be honest. So I'm kind of more interested in a way what you guys think about it, because yeah, I just had trouble. One kind of interesting way I was looking at it was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jung all that much. You might be a little bit. But he had this concept of individuation, obviously, that as we mature, part of that job of maturing is individuating. And I was kind of thinking about that in terms of how you become independent as a person. And something I've noticed in romantic relationships is people who have not individuated properly, um, which is to say that they don't really act as themselves as the primary beneficiary of their lives. Let's put it that way. That they're not fully independent. They can go down this path of being super dependent upon others, and require the approval of others, whether that be a romantic partner or just other people in their lives. Um, and in a sense, perhaps they see themselves as not being entirely worthy of love because they haven't individuated properly. And like a lot of my romantic partners have been super dependent, I would say. And I believe that's because they didn't individuate and they didn't become properly independent in the way that they were interacting with the world in general. And this makes love difficult to talk about because I think that people aren't very mature. They're not very well developed typically. And romantic relationships are just, particularly these days, I really just feel like they're on a spectrum of psychological dysfunction personally. But I guess that issue is a little bit different from talking about what maybe love could be or something like that. But yeah, I'm not going to lie, I had trouble. So I'll just open the floor to you guys now because, yeah, it's a little bit of a confused rant.
That was good. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not a big fan of anything romanticism when it comes to women and all this stuff. I mean, a lot of it, I think it's so easy to glorify it. And I think that, I mean, one thing that it's obviously a big deal is all the divorce rates, all the unhappy marriages. I mean, even growing up, I don't think I knew a single person that was happily married. I don't even know if I know a single person that's happily married now. So it
Well, do
just
you know
makes you
anyone who's
question the whole
happily
thing.
single?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I think
I'm
I've
happily single.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I mean,
I've
I
enjoyed.
think more so. I mean, it's not as there seems something almost worse about like the how do I say like I mean, especially in the divorce case is like the biggest one where, they merge your life together and then one woman is unhappy because there's no expectations, there's no like even with the thing when you talk about like love, okay, loving someone full acceptance, does that mean that everything under the sun is acceptable then? Like if I'm poly and I have 20 partners or I have whatever, like there's obviously has to be some rules, some guidelines of stuff that works and doesn't work based off of human nature somewhere, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. Yeah.
So what's that? I mean, what do you think if there are rules or are there rules or then what would they be?
I think they'd have to be rules that work for both or however many partners there are, presumably two. I mean, you try to find someone that you're compatible enough that you can have like at least some semblance of a shared value system, for example.
Hmm.
But getting to something that SOFcast was talking about, individuation, I would say the individuation is like a modern innovation. I think throughout most of the human race, we've identified more with the family or with the tribe than with our individual person. So, yeah, that's why Buddhism tends to frown on romantic love. It's like wholesome love is called metta, for example, in Pali, whereas you've got words like sneha or piya, like that are more of a sentimental kind of a state that is considered to be largely unwholesome, and it's largely because of this attachment and clinging and dependence, which, from a Buddhist point of view, you're better off without. Although um, I mean, we are designed by nature to be family members, for example, and like I've said before, living the life of a layperson is an advanced difficulty setting. It's a higher difficulty setting for spiritual practice because there are more um, responsibilities and distractions and so forth, and also more temptations. But still, I mean, anything that you can do as a spiritual practice. Although some certain things like, stealing is you're probably best not attempting that one, but, still. And, while I'm rambling here, I would say that, I've read a couple times in books about how the feeling of being in love, when you first fall in love with somebody and they just seem beautiful and wonderful and perfect, that's a kind of delusion. I think Freud even define love, like romantic love, as overestimation of the sex object. But really, I mean, this isn't really Orthodox Buddhism, but you can say that in a sense, everything is perfect. And when you're in that state of just being in love and seeing another person as beautiful and wonderful and perfect, that's not really delusion. In fact, in a sense, that's more sane than the usual state of just seeing everything as flawed. And that's one of the greatest blessings anybody can have in this world, is to have somebody who knows you through and through, who just loves you and thinks you're wonderful anyway,
I
who
mean,
just
isn't that
knows
just
all
two
your
sides of the
dirty
same
secrets
coin?
and so forth, and just still just flat out loves you.
I mean, wouldn't that just be two sides of the same coin, though? I mean, if they're perfect or they're completely flawed, I mean, in the end, it's really neither. Isn't that closer to the truth?
Well, it depends on how you look at it, I suppose. I mean, ultimately, you can say it's all an illusion or whatever.
I mean, in the
Or
sense
you
of
can
like,
say,
if you just
going with a theistic point of view, it's all a manifestation of God. Like Neem Karoli Baba used to say, Sab Ishwar Hai, it's all God. And so if you can see God in another person, that's obviously going to be helpful to you if you can't see God in anybody else.
well, I think even that's like a level deeper. I mean, I'm just saying, like, purely as in, even if like seeing, okay, here's a body, the body does this things, the mind, their mind's at this place, it does these things, and there's just no value judgment, I would think, where you can just understand the place and the scheme of things that it lies. I mean, more like in that sense, not like in like the it's being able to see. I mean, the higher state is to be able to see God in all things, I think, but that wouldn't really be a projection of perfection as much as a connecting with the divinity of that particular object or person, right? As far as going back to the Jungian thing, um, because I mean, me, obviously, I was a psychology major and just dropped out recently, and Sonny's still hitting the psychology hard. I really liked Jung's idea of individualization because it's basically said, okay, well, if you want to transcend the ego, first you have to develop an ego that's strong enough that transcendence is a possibility. It's one of the reasons why I don't think mushrooms is a real spiritual path. I think you can do a whole bunch of mushrooms and all this stuff and maybe have all these higher experiences and dissolve all of this, but I think it does something to the ego itself. Like you have to first develop an ego and then channel that energy, that focus, that discipline that's been developed from the ego development into transcendence. Seems to work that way. And I think that's the individualization. Jesus. There we go.
Individuation. Yeah, yeah. So,
I
so
still
what I
can't say it
meant by
right.
that is, so what I more meant by that is not like indulging in egotism so much as self-defining within a cultural context that's healthy, and that means in a sense that if you're pathologically dependent on other people, you could say that you're dependent on other people for your personal value, um, and that in a way that you're not entirely kind of, I guess, what you could call self-defining, or I think Jung called it self-actualizing without the involvement um, or approval of other people. Whereas I think it's probably more desirable, and I think maybe this is where it kind of ties in with love, is that um, you can individuate in a more healthy way, in a way that you become independent of other people, largely in your values and in the way that you interact with the world. And perhaps, and I've never personally experienced this entirely just yet, but if you had two people uh, that were individuated sufficiently, and not like pathologically dependent on each other, that you could maybe then get to that ideal relationship state that Panno's talking about. Because I think we're talking on different levels a bit here as well, right? Like, yeah, the individual's capacity to experience love from another person. And I think perhaps it's there. I don't know. Personally, this is all just theory. I got no idea. But yeah, I'm more getting at our love, our ideas of love and our culture have so much like just weird pathological stuff, Hollywood stuff, just tied up in it. You know, which is an inheritance of X thousand years of different cultural influences and all this kind of stuff. And in a way, yeah, I feel like right now, anyway, that's not working out all that well for people. I think that, yeah, as Manu says, man, like I don't know anyone that's in an ideal relationship in that way. And yeah, I just wonder,
Or I would
why is that? You know?
I mean, I would even say in a relationship that I would want for myself better than being single. Like, I guess that's a better way to say it, because, I mean, if I saw someone, it's like, okay, well, this is better than me being alone and single, then I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna do that. But it's not even that. It's worse from what I can see.
Yeah.
It hasn't kept me from trying a whole lot to pursue it because there's still a lot of drive towards it. But I mean, the thing is too, I mean, this is kind of different but related topic is I mean, I really do believe that there's a masculine and feminine energy. And you can embody these to different degrees. And then for the relationship to work, there's certain, archetypal patterns that have to be embodied. And if you embody these archetypal patterns, then things align and they work together in a harmonious way. And a lot of our older religions were very, I mean, they're patriarchal pretty much across the board. There's very clear ways in which women behave towards men and, men protect and men have certain duties. And I wonder if that's really what's gone awry is that a lot of men don't know what it means to be men. A lot of women don't know what it means to be women, and therefore the interpersonal dynamics don't work.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
part of
that's
it. I think another part of it is just in American liberal consumer culture, people just want everything to be pleasant and convenient and comfortable. And so they're really not willing to endure the difficulties that can arise when you've got two people living at close quarters, having to cooperate when they may not agree. And I think part of the problem with um, the whole idea of love, like SOFcast was talking about, and you mentioned a little bit, is just this unrealistic ideal of romanticism, where they're confusing love with the feeling of being in love. So that if you love somebody, you're just going to be like madly in love with them for the rest of your life. Whereas that's a hormone high that for most people isn't going to last more than a few years at most. And then ideally, when the hormone high, by the time the hormone high has subsided, you've got like a more solid foundation to base your love on. But if you do have a real love relationship, I mean, it's like you've created a new being. You've got still yourself and the other person, but then there's this us that is like a being in its own right. That I mean, you're part of a larger consciousness. And if you can love the entire human race or the entire universe, then you've pretty much just expanded yourself out to the ultimate us.
Mhm.
But just to be able to manage that with one person is possibly more than the average person can really accomplish if they're just not right for it.
It's interesting. Nietzsche thought that that friendship was superior to love, or that kind of infatuated love that you're describing, like how you have powerful hormonal responses and you think you're in love and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
that's
he said,
mating
whatever
instincts
you do,
essentially.
yeah. So don't marry for love, but but that that's heresy in the red pill community to say that you want to be friends with your wife. And I kind of see both perspectives in a way. Like, yeah, you don't want it to be pure friendship. There's got to be some element, obviously, of that masculine and feminine interaction, that co-interdependence that I was talking about. But yeah, maybe friendship is superior. And friendship is kind of a form of love, isn't it? Really, if you think about it. My friends have been with me far longer than any romantic partner has been so far.
Mm.
Forever. Some of them.
Well,
I mean,
while
I
we're
always
mentioning Western philosophers, I'd bring up, first of all, Schopenhauer wrote a really nice little essay trying to explain why it is that arranged marriages tend to be more stable and work better than marriages for love. And marriages for love are generally based on this hormone high of falling in love, and then that fades, and then all of a sudden you can't stand the way she licks stamps or whatever. Whereas with an arranged marriage, it's you come into it with no hormone high, really, maybe a little bit of adrenaline at the very beginning, and there's like no preconceived notions with regard to the other person that are going to be dashed. And then you gradually just learn to love each other almost like brother and sister. And also, I might as well just toss in another Western philosopher, Plato, in his Symposium. The whole thing is a dialogue about love. And
Mhm.
they just dismiss romantic love between a man and a woman as just so inferior as not even to be worthy of mention. And they start off with love of a man and a youth as like the the lowest that you could really call genuine love. And then they work up to like divine love after that.
Hmm. Yeah, true love between a man and a man, right? That's the
Yeah.
real love. I mean, I do think that there should be some more the tribes are important, belonging to a tribe, extending yourself, having a partner that you can then use to build a family. Obviously, children are important, and having healthy families are important. So there has to be some way, I think, in which men and women can align for the benefit of themselves and others. Especially from a spiritual perspective. I think that's kind of a given. Um, but I think that with the culture being so um, toxic, really, I mean, it basically promotes every single value that I think will destroy a relationship. Um, and the whole materialism of everything, where it's really just about trying to chase status or something like that. I mean, on one level, I get it though, because there's something so fundamental to wanting status and power, and that creates safety. And but I mean, I think there was much more of an esoteric basis to Western culture prior to um, well, need like Nietzsche said, the death of God, and then after that, it's been kind of slowly dissolving into kind of science, which is by nature much more atheistic. And it's kind of, I mean, it's sad. Um,
What what do you think of the notion? And I'll just put this out to the group generally. Is like I actually think civilization and taboos and ways of formalizing the way that say you get married or you're meant to act in a marriage or a relationship, that they're designed to tame the beast largely. Um, and really the collapses come from the collapse of those structures. Um, that maybe the human beings are not inherently how would you say civilized animals, and that those structures are there to civilize this animal. And I know it's kind of a Darwinian way of looking at things, but
which
I,
structures?
the structures of marriage in a society. So marriage is an institution to try and tame the animal, the human animal.
Well, it does work that way sometimes. I mean, that's sort of a
Yeah.
basic sort of spiritual benefit of having a romantic relationship is a lot of party guys just have to settle down and start behaving themselves when they get themselves a woman. Or sometimes it works the other way too. But yeah, I mean, it's like established norms and just culture in general. It adds necessary structure to our lives. Otherwise, we're just living in a kind of insane chaos or just raw animal instinct. If you believe in that,
So how does that then? How do you tie that in with like what we call love? Is romantic love then just one of those notions that someone came up with in our culture at some point to impose that regulation of the animal? Do you
I don't
think?
think romantic love is any kind of cultural construct. Although, I mean, it can be modified by cultural constructs. But to me, it's pretty clearly an animal instinct. It's like a animal mating instinct in the human animal. It's like the forming of the pair bond. At least
Yeah,
the
so
the
you,
like the
yeah.
feeling, the emotional feeling of falling in love, I would call just an animal instinct in the human animal. Although it does have a spark of genuine love in it, to the extent that there is acceptance, open-heartedness, like at least some slight breaking down of Pink Floyd's wall, then there is some genuine love in there. But people confuse the emotion or the instinct, the mating instinct, with the like the essence of love that underlies it. Seems to me.
Mm, I'm still confused, to be honest. I don't. I just can't see how those things are separated in a way. Like they're the same same thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm confused.
I
I'll
mean,
just I'll shut
I
up.
feel like for me, I can't really get over like the fact that most monks and a lot of the spiritual paths, I mean, like all the intense spiritual, I mean, as soon as you basically, really want to pursue spirituality, they basically tell you to be celibate and go become a monk, right? And we've kind of done that. And, it's like, why is that? I mean, if it was really like, okay, well, you can just find love with a partner and it's all kind of the same, there wouldn't be any reason for that. Like, there's obviously something it's subtracting from spiritually that justifies it. That I think it makes it obvious that it wouldn't be an ideal spiritual situation. I mean, not that I mean it's probably slightly better if you can do it than, marriage. I mean, I think even in the Bible there's kind of a verse that if you can't basically be celibate, then better off to get married. And if you
Yeah,
can't get
better to
married,
marry than to burn.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like on that, those stages. Um, but man, I think it's there's a lot of temptation and it's very like I mean, I think that for me especially it's being able to trust a woman enough, knowing what the culture is, knowing what a lot of these people think, how they think, the fact that they haven't thought about most things because most things are just culturally programmed. That's one thing that I feel like women kind of have a slight disadvantage on is I think that women are much generally heavier more heavily influenced by the culture itself. So if the culture is more toxic, they tend to be more toxic because they're much more social. They have to be more socially sensitive. And so therefore they absorb things a lot easier socially. Well, men, it tends to be a little bit more life is harder on men, tougher, and it tends to be make men more into an individual that then has to think for themselves and lead. And leadership, I think, even as a whole, tends to be far more masculine quality for that reason, and it serves its purpose. So you have one side that is more entangled with other people, with the culture, and you have one side that is more of a thinker, individualist, and that's more the masculine energy. And it's kind of there's an interplay that's good between those two. But I mean, when the culture is really bad, I really feel like the women are like basically the first to be affected by it, and affects them far more. And
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, I wrote an essay trying to explain that it's like instinctive in the human female to be more adaptable, more chameleon like with regard to whatever happens to be in fashion, whatever is the cultural norms, largely because according to the theory, throughout most of the history of the human race, you've got intertribal warfare where one tribe goes in and kills all the men and just takes all the women as concubines. So a
Hmm.
woman, much more than a man for a million years of our existence, could just find herself transplanted into an entirely new system with worshiping different gods, talking a different language, wearing different
Hmm.
clothes and so forth. So they have to be more flexible with regard to that stuff, whereas guys
Hmm.
are more conservative in that regard, I think.
Hmm.
Although I will mention that I seem to have lucked out in that my sweetheart had a radical feminist mother, and she sort of rebelled against that and became trad.
Well, I think that's the number one quality for a good partner is an anti-feminist. That's like the beginning criteria, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's any feminism in there, just run the other way. That's pretty much my basic. I mean, but on a serious note, I mean, what would you say are the qualities? Because it's funny. I mean, I almost got married myself. I was with a Korean woman for 4 years, moved to Korea, but eventually I realized she was, so she would have been unhappy in the US and also too with me and my spiritual endeavors. As much as she might try to understand, it just wasn't a part of her reality. And I loved her, and I still love her and I still feel like, now she's married and happy and she's in Korea and I feel like I did the right thing. But I mean, to find someone that really values both spirituality and growth and not just trying to get a bunch of money to have a comfortable life, which is I think what most people are pursuing is entertainment and comfort. And I just fundamentally disagree with that. But that's also too a more masculine frame. I mean, I always kind of go back and forth about, I mean, let's say, and I do. I mean, I would love to have get married and have a partner I could trust. I mean, what really are the qualities that have to be there? And then what stuff is negotiable? You can negotiate.
I think that would depend on your capacity to love and be vulnerable. Because, I mean, in order to really love somebody, you have to be vulnerable to that extent. You just have to be open hearted and just, have all your armor down. And It may be the main difficulty is just finding a person that you can trust enough or be intimate close enough that you can actually just let your armor down, just knock down Pink Floyd's wall in that direction anyway. And I read one of the first self-help books that I'm aware of is Games People Play. I can't remember who
Mhm.
wrote it, back in the 60s. He's
Heard
just
about it.
the whole premise of the book is that most people are incapable of intense intimacy with another person. They just don't have the spiritual maturity or the emotional maturity. They just cannot be intimate in a prolonged sense with another person. And so they have these games that they play that sort of keeps the person close, but not too close, sort of like at
Mm,
arm's length.
interesting.
And yeah, and I think it's true. I think most people really just are clueless with regard to like the higher nature of love, like the spiritual aspect of it. And like again, Buddhism really frowns on romantic love and so forth, but I think most of the spiritual teachers in the West, including those that are considered by some to be enlightened, like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti and people like that, they tend to be married.
Mm.
So it could be largely, I mean, to some degree, it's a cultural thing. Ancient India was really into renunciation and becoming a wandering vagrant and so forth, which doesn't work very well with women.
But also,
Like
it's
in
like
a
the type of
relationship.
yeah. I mean, the type of wives, right? Because even like say like one of my favorites is Nisargadatta Maharaj. He
Yeah,
was married, but I mean, all these people had wives that were supportive of what they were doing and
yeah.
understood and stuff. And it's like I don't even think I've never even gotten close to. Well, maybe I maybe have gotten kind of close, but it's still like there's just so many things that have to align. I have to be attracted to the person enough. Usually even age is a factor. I usually just don't feel like if a woman is not within a certain range, I don't feel like having children with her, which is a big factor in if I want to marry her. And so there's like the beauty thing, there's the age thing, there's the then if they're younger, the amount of them actually having thought about certain philosophies and being able to be compatible on a philosophical or spiritual level is unlikely. So I mean, I'm just like, did I just paint myself in a corner, and do I really want anything that wouldn't be that? I mean, that's basically what I've been debating quite a lot.
Well, I think part of it is you're an American, and so you're fussy. Like in Burma, for example, you spent some time in Burma, didn't you? I did.
Yeah, good old 3 months.
And I think one of the advantages of people getting married in Burma is that it's largely a conformity oriented culture. And so everybody shares more or less the same values, and you can
Mhm.
just like mix people together almost at random and they're going to be compatible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in America, individuality is it's highly stressed, and so people are, there's such a broad spectrum of different points of view that, especially if you're an outlier, if you're on the fringe yourself, it may be very difficult finding someone that really you've got a chemistry with that you can sort of be in sync with.
Well, I think anyone that's really deeply spiritual, like it has developed more and more as an individual. It tends to be different. I can't think of even of a single spiritual teacher that I respected that wasn't a completely his own person and different from just the society at large in a way. Um, so I mean, which also makes me think maybe there is a point where marriage itself is such a cultural thing that you've basically decided to be outside the culture because you've decided to pursue a path that's not really endorsed by the culture, especially American culture. Maybe if I was an American, it would be easier. If I was in India, probably, I could still find a wife and it'd be fine. But
Yeah, or your parents would just fix you up with a wife when you were 12 years old and you wouldn't meet her until your wedding day.
yeah, well, what's really funny actually is that my parents were married in a Hindu ashram. They both spent 10 years there basically meditating together. Um, got married, and then I was born, and the first 5 years of my life were in that Hindu ashram. And I remember going to see an Ayurvedic doctor. We were talking about relationships. He's like, and I told him about my upbringing and stuff, and he was like, "Oh yeah, the reason you have never gotten married is because your ideal is what your parents had. That's what you were brought up, and that's what you want. And there's some truth to that. I mean, I think no one's ever kind of good enough to some extent because it's like I still want someone that I can meditate with is spiritual. We spend all this time, and then from that can come whatever. But yeah, it's just But on the other side, I think too. I mean, I've always had a very strong sex drive, and it's like I can go out. Girls seem to like me in general for the most part, so it's like it's very tempting, and it's like just being torn in two directions. It's quite frustrating, to be honest, as someone who's very spiritual. It's like on one side, I'm like, okay, well, I just want to meditate and I shouldn't be doing this. But on the other side, it's like, oh, let's go out because I know that it's going to be fun, And so it's, yeah, just driving me absolutely crazy.
Well, part of your problem is that you live in Los Angeles.
That is a problem. I'm gonna come.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come see you, Panno. I'm coming to you.
Yeah.
Moving into
Yeah,
your
I'm in the
house.
Bible Belt. Lots of
That's-
conservative Christian, like church-going Christian girls.
Okay, good, good. Find me one before I get there, if you could, please. I don't
Oh
have a
yeah,
lot of
okay.
time. If you could just, get some friends, put out an ad in my picture,
Oh yeah, there you
maybe
go.
put it on some posts at church. See what happens. But how about you guys?
Yeah, just to add to that, Manu, I don't think it's impossible to find someone who shares a love for truth as you do. How many people are there on the earth? I feel that if you both share a love for truth, I think that's the greatest opportunity the relationship has to survive the entire distance. Because there's always going to be grievances, divergences of views and opinions. We have different conditioning and emotional characters. So there's always going to be, you know, us rubbing up against them in different ways. But if we really have that reset button, and everything can take a fresh start. And I feel that that reset button is, love for the truth. Whether the other person knows it or not. And, either it can be that way or, I think you just have to be utterly vulnerable and accept everything in the other person, which is very difficult, especially if you're with someone who is very brainwashed by society and is, investing their happiness in objects and outer things. But none of that is reliable. So if you find someone who does share a love for truth and understanding, then you can really be truly intimate, I believe. It also removes the impossible demands that people place on each other to make them happy. Because I feel like true love involves detachment. And it doesn't have that insecurity that most relationships have. So, never say never. I think that deeply loving someone doesn't overcome everything in relationships, but it can overcome a huge lot. And obviously, there are other human elements that need to be mixed in, like physical, sexual, intellectual. But ultimately, a love for truth will take you very far. So, I do feel like that's important.
And a large capacity for forgiveness.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something else in because I think we're talking on a very spiritual level, but I can't help but return to this more like I guess what you call a hardline biological approach to this in some way, and I think part of the reason marriages aren't working, at least from what I see, is that men need to be given a reason to bother. And I'm just listening to Manu, and this really came up. I really feel like one of the big reasons is paternity of children and ensuring that you haven't been cucked, to be honest. So you look for those features in a woman that they're not going to do that to you, because raising someone else's kid is biologically a disaster for a man. You're wasting resources, raising someone else's kid. So from a dude's perspective, you're going to want a woman who's not going to do that to you, and you're going to look for traits in them that show that they're not going to do that to you. And let's face it, society has gone down a path where they encourage that kind of behavior, at least the outward forms of the behavior that would indicate a woman is that way inclined. Um, and the other thing that men need in a relationship is really leadership, and that's not to be beaten down like a fool by their wife. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot in relationships. People who are still together and in fairly functional relationships, you know, they've got houses, couple of kids, that kind of thing. But I just see women just kick the proverbial shit out of them constantly, and they just look like a dog that's been abused. You know what I mean? It's actually a really sad sight in many ways. Um, I honestly feel like one of the biggest reasons that relationships aren't working, romantic relationships aren't working in our civilization at least, is because men have no leadership, and they really just can't be fucked, pardon my French, getting into it, and they're rejecting it in larger and larger numbers. And look, people can write books on whatever they want, equality in relationships, you know, love languages, doing equal housework, whatever nonsense is out this month, that it's not going to work because there's no real need to be in a relationship. And I'm diverging a little bit from maybe what other people are saying here, taking a more biological approach. But I think there is a very large degree of self-interest in a romantic relationship, or at least a marriage. And, you know, our civilization is not giving men any reason to bother overall. Obviously, there's exceptions to things, but the more you chip away at that male propensity for leadership, I suppose, leadership of the family, and also in the guarantee of the paternity of his children. And you see that today, right? You see like certain countries saying, well, you can't have a DNA test if you're suspicious the kid's not yours. Policies like that. And that actually ties into female sexuality and its drives to a large degree. So I think you're going to see a further bifurcation, a further collapse of romantic relationships, because more men are just going to check out. But ultimately, I think the women are the ones that are going to suffer in this scenario. It's not good for them, even though they think it is. It's not good for them. And I've seen many single mothers that struggle constantly. And I see many of these same mechanisms play out in their life as well. So yeah, just to add a little bit of difference into the conversation, I think it's a valuable framing to a large degree when you're talking about why marriages don't work in our civilization.
I mean, the big fear for me, I know especially, is like just being in the rat race, just stuck working for, your whole life in a job you don't want for your family, but it's not really, you don't even get anything from your family. Your wife resents you because you're not bringing in more money and they can't do as much stuff and your job isn't as great and you're just getting shit on from both sides. I mean,
For
that
sure.
seems
Then you
like,
get a divorce, then you pay child support, then you literally can't do anything. And then
yeah.
you look at Canada, for example. Someone was telling me about Canadian divorce law. I'm like, that is outrageous. Just
Mhm.
alimony for the rest of your life. You're just paying this
Yeah.
woman. And so what you got to think, right? Like, so why would you bother? Honestly. So maybe you could have a relationship that was kind of de facto, but even a de facto relationship in most legal setups is similar to a marriage anyway. So yeah, I get that there's like this transcendental love thing going on, but also there's a very, I would say, like from my perspective, a more significant degree of straight up Darwinian biology in this. And maybe there's elements of love and attraction in that whole process, but at the end of the day, if you're a guy and you have all these risks to do with things, and you're not having the baby, right? You don't need any of this. You could just go and knock up 1,000 girls if you wanted to, and it wouldn't really matter that much. Theoretically, there's no reason to be in a marriage or a relationship like that, in my opinion.
And the other big topic that relates to this, and then I'll let you jump in, Panno, is just also just the fact that a lot of these women have been with so many partners too. Once they're past, start sleeping around, they're already, once they hit their 30s, they've already been sleeping around for quite a while. Their ability to actually bond or to work through anything and all this emotional damage just like adds up in a way that I don't think it does in men. And that's one of the real other factors too why I think it's so hard.
I know girls with body counts like almost to 100. I knew one pretty well that like yeah, and there's good evidence on this, right? Like the more partners a female has, the less she's able to pair bond in later life. There
Uh,
there are biological realities to this that this collapse that are not considered very often.
and the
Um,
access now because they have access to all these guys, I mean, a
yeah,
lot of the girls even
100%.
that I would talk to because I'd ask some of these girls that, when I was around and meeting women and, I mean, ask them like, how many guys have you been with or whatever. A lot of times they would be 20 and have 20, already.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa. And then like,
You could probably double it.
yeah,
That's
I
just what
mean,
they
it's
told
just
you.
like, wow. And this is where it's at. And it's, I mean, and it's like, okay, so I'm supposed to go accept this person as they are, love them, and that's what's going to work. I don't see it. Bono. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, like a number of things I'd point out. One is just force of habit. I mean, anybody who's already had 20 relationships, they're pretty much in the habit of having temporary relationships. So it's going to make it more difficult. But getting back to SOFcast and his talk about Darwinism, I mean, from a Darwinian point of view, it does seem to pay off to be an alpha. And a pointer to young men out there, it's like if you have a woman in your life, she's going to try to control you to some degree. But if she succeeds, she's going to lose respect for you.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it pays to be an alpha and not just give in all the time. I mean, I mean, there's a certain amount of give and take and compromise and so forth. But if it just seems unreasonable, then you got to draw the line somewhere.
So I don't get where the acceptance is. Like I feel like this is like there's a certain standard as we as men have to meet and understand, and then that's what's going to lead to the promised land. But I don't. And then when it starts getting to like, oh well, you just accept them as they are, this and that, it just seems like such a counter argument. It's like, what about having conversations with her, how to, you know, move things in the relationship in certain ways and communicate? Because there's going to be a lot of how to do all that. I feel like is just so brushed under the rug, and a lot of it is stuff you kind of have to learn by developing your own alpha sense of things, I think, and then you can basically impose a certain sense of discipline, a certain sense of respect being a big one. I don't know, I mean, that's why the that whole argument about the radical acceptance of a partner, I just start thinking of all this other stuff that we're discussing right now, and I'm just like, I don't know how you reconcile this.
Well, it helps to have somebody that you're reasonably compatible with. I mean, to find somebody that you're compatible with enough that say, okay, I can be with this person for the rest of my life, and then you make the commitment.
Mhm.
But still, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like just staying with I mean, it's like life itself is difficult, and people just blame, like someone's unhappy that they're single, they're unhappy. They think, oh, I'm unhappy because I'm single, and then they get married, and they're still unhappy because it's just human nature. I mean, if
Mhm.
you're happy single, you're more likely to be happy married. If you're unhappy single, you're more likely to be unhappy married. And then they get married, they're still not happy. Well, maybe I should have kids, then I'll be happy. And then they have the kids, and then they're pretty much just stuck.
I mean, personality plays a big factor too. As far as finding a good match as well. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I used when I lived in Burma, it's like lived in Burma for more than 20 years, and mostly I was interacting with, simple-hearted Burmese village women, you know. And every once in a while you meet one, you just kind of think, what would it be like to marry her, and she'd be faithful, and she'd be religious and virtuous to some, relatively speaking. But still, I mean, she'd have almost no originality, just be sort of like a housekeeper that you sleep with, and there'd be very little input into conversations and so forth.
You don't think it's going to be like Thailand? I mean, Thailand is basically a polygamous culture. I mean, the amount of cheating and all that other stuff. I mean, it might look innocent on the outskirts, but I think in reality, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not
The
sure about
French are like
Thailand.
that too.
So was
Yeah,
that?
the French are like that too.
Hmm.
Mistresses and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I still think. I mean, there's obviously countries that are not as bad as here. I mean, it was even weird when I was like in Ukraine before. and seeing the traditional kind of perspective over there. Um, it was very strange actually. It was like the first time I kind of realized, okay, well, if this was a conservative culture, what would it look like? It's definitely a lot healthier. You could just tell that everything was taken much more seriously. Like the how casual sexual things in marriage and relationships are taken in America is also like just makes no sense to me. I just don't find it to be a casual thing. There's so much at stake in a way, emotionally,
Yeah, well, the person
mentally.
you choose for your mate is that's one of the most important decisions you're going to make, assuming that you make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I'm probably like 90% just been like, I'm probably never getting married. Probably gonna do my thing. I'll go out, have my fun when I want to, and I'm just gonna do my meditation, do my whatever, off and on. I can travel. I have my money. I'm self sufficient. I mean, what else? I mean, it would take so much convincing. I feel like, or so much a certain woman that really I felt like actually added enough to make it worth it, and it makes me think that it's probably never gonna happen. If I'm being hundred
You'll be
percent
right,
honest.
mate. No need to get sad about it. I'm sure something will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like, look, I agree, Manu. You got to find someone that enhances you, right? Like, it just comes down to that scale. Like,
I
is
feel
this person enhancing me or are they diminishing me? And most of them diminish, I think, these days.
yeah, I've just had such a wide scale and so many experiences, so many different types of women, and it's just like it just feels like it's always something. It's something if the
Yeah.
one thing is working, another thing's not working, and it's just like
The other thing, just quickly, is like age. So we're probably about a similar age, and I
mhm,
think the reason, like, Panno is talking about people in Burma, and they're probably getting married when they're like, I don't know, 14 or something, probably. But when they're young, and I think there's like an idealism that goes along with, like, I remember being younger and just your capacity to be infatuated maybe or to fall in love was a lot more innocent and pure, and as you get older, you become cynical, and it just becomes harder to find someone for that reason, I think, which is why maybe cultures encourage people to get married at a young age.
I mean,
It's
also
my
too,
experience.
if you can pull it off, I mean, being able to have sex with different, I mean, from evolutionary, going back to the biology, if you're such a guy that you are, desirable and you can have sex with multiple beautiful women when you please, as you please, I mean, that's a pretty solid, like, that's something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Well, if you're
that's,
You're
willing to
experiencing
leave
divine love often.
various litters of fatherless children, I mean, there is a certain responsibility there too. I think.
well, or no children. I feel like it's more like the likely outcome. I mean, I don't know, even with the kids thing, it's like maybe it's with all the unknowns, it's like, I mean, this is really a good idea in general. I question it like quite a lot. I mean, I'm 33, so it's kind of like at that point where you're starting to think, I got to make a decision, I guess, to some degree. I mean, there's still some time, but um, I mean, I know I would definitely never marry someone unless I knew them for a number of years first, and it's also too. I mean, I've had relationships, recent ones, where I really fell in love and thought everything was great, and it was completely like I was so everything was exactly the opposite of what I thought it was. And I've been blindsided like a good 2 or 3 times, maybe within the past, like, 2 or 3 years. They were, like, where I really invested and it just went so far south. And so I think that's a big part of it too. It's like, I don't even trust my ability to judge it now.
Yeah, well, I started off cynical. I mean, my parents were married a combined total of 10 times. My father was married 5 times, and my mother was married 5 times. So I was rather cynical in my youth, just seeing what a fiasco most of those marriages turned out to be. My mother was divorced 5 times, but my father, number five, was the right one for him, and he was happily married with her for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So I started off cynical, but then, I mean, as you get older, um, I assume in most people a certain maturity kicks in and just the capacity to love or more of an appreciation of um, the rewards of of a loving relationship become more apparent or seem more worthwhile or something.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think I'm just I'm gonna visit you, Pano. I'm gonna see what your relationship's like, and then I'm just gonna judge off of that. I'm like, okay, if Pano could do this, will I
Yeah.
accept this? Because I don't think I can do better than Pano can do.
Follow us
So,
around taking notes.
Come
uh,
to London. I love your accent.
yeah, yeah. I was in London actually. I got my heart broken in London. I did have a girl. I was there for a whole month. Believe
No
it or not.
way.
Yeah, yeah. It was she was like half Thai, half Jewish, and she was really interesting. But yeah, that was an absolute fiasco. The whole thing, it was ended in flames. It was a long story. But yeah,
Karma.
yeah, a lot of karma. Making a lot of karma for myself. That's what my dad keeps saying. Because my parents are very spiritual and they're just like, my dad's like, don't make karma for yourself. I'm like, oh crap. Keep messing that one up.
Yeah. I had an alpha father. I mean, he was just the stereotypical alpha male, I think. And I mean, he just needed a woman in his life. He just really liked women, and he usually preferred being in a relationship with a woman, and he was fine with monogamy. And
Mm,
some of the stories he has told me, it's like I wrote one down in my blog, just sort of contra MGTOW. It's just, this is how you go about it. You don't just complain about abusive women. I mean, like my father, when he lived in Alaska, this is back in the 50s before I was born, he was shacked up with some Eskimo woman named Nellie. And, she was pretty much just there to, look after the house and somebody to sleep with. I think, I don't think they shared ideals or any such thing.
mm.
And one day he came home from work late, and it was totally innocent. He was helping someone start their car or something. But when he gets home, he finds Nellie, this half wild woman, bare ass naked in the middle of the kitchen with a butcher knife in her hand. And she is just furious and she accuses him of being unfaithful. And it's kind of understand, she's just in the mood. She's looking forward to getting home, and he's just late and he's not showing up, and she's getting more frustrated and more pissed off. And these worst case scenarios are spinning through her head until finally she's convinced that he's messing around with somebody else. And so she literally comes at him with a butcher knife and tries to kill him. And my father, he's not a coward, so he grabs her arm that's holding the knife, but she
Yeah.
cuts his arm up pretty good doing this kind of stuff before he gets the knife away from her. And finally, he gets the knife away from her. He's got her pinned on the kitchen floor. She's already naked. He thinks, well, what the hell? So he goes for it. And he said that this Eskimo girl, I mean, just being screwed on the kitchen floor in a puddle of blood just turned her on. She just went ballistic. And then it was just everything's fine. It was just I could not comprehend my father, this woman who literally tries to murder him with a butcher knife, and he just continues sleeping with her. And then on a later occasion, she prostitutes herself with another guy in order to get the money to buy my father's birthday present, and that was too much. He couldn't
Wow.
accept that. But trying to kill him, it was fine. It was just he just took it and kept going.
It's pretty alpha.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna find
Kind of
myself a fiery
incomprehensible.
Eskimo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we just had fire Eskimos that were trying to kill us all the time, we'd be way more on our game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well,
But I am in a relationship now, and it's a good one. And yeah, I'm happy that I'm in the relationship.
hmm,
It's I'm reminded of something Ram Dass said in one of his books a long time ago that said the only valid reason for being in a relationship with another person is if it will help you be free or help you to wake up, if it will help you spiritually. From a spiritual point of view, that's the only valid excuse.
hmm,
And there's various ways that a person can help you, even if they're just like triggering you all the time. It's bringing up stuff that you can confront. Even that would be just a baseline sort of benefit. Not
hmm.
that I'm saying that's something to base a relationship on, but still, it can happen.
I mean, it does seem well. Yeah, it's interesting. Even with the monogamy versus non-monogamy thing, it does seem like. I mean, I thought kind of for a second there that monogamy might be better than going around or sleeping around with a bunch of women, but then also too, I mean, you have people who are just codependent, and it's definitely worse. on that side. I guess it just depends on yeah, what's in the highest good for what you need. I
Yeah,
guess
I think ideally you would stay together, a man and a woman or, whoever they are would stay together, not through like attachment, which, is the cause of all suffering from the Buddhist point of view, but just because you both of you acknowledge that it's just the right thing to do, that, you are compatible and you enjoy each other's company and you love each other and, you're happier together than apart sort of a thing. And so you
I
just
mean, the
do
thing
it.
is, I mean, I want to grow, and I know how much someone that you're living with is going to take up your energy, your space. I mean, the thing also I'm afraid of is like, okay, so I'm very spiritual, right? So I do a lot of meditation, maybe, and I get older and I start wanting to devote more and more time to that, and she's not really into that, and having someone like that that maybe isn't as dedicated or whatever in your space, I feel like, man, this would be such a disaster. And the rates of growth, like if I'm growing maybe differently spiritually or I have different interests, I want to spend more time because a lot of it's just where you're devoting your time to. And I want to devote more time. I don't want to go to Disneyland. I don't want to go see a movie. I want to go to the temple. I want to meditate, right? And she doesn't. It's just like, oh man, I think that's just like a really high likelihood, and it definitely scares me. But I mean, I guess I could find someone with similar values, but then people change. I mean, I think I used to be very, very anti-divorce almost too, but now I feel like as I've gotten older, I kind of get it on both sides. It's like, man, if you're unhappy and that person's taking up so much of your time and energy and resources and all that, and they want to do something else besides what you want to do, I mean, what are you going to do, really? And the whole thing just seems like, man, it's the chance of things going south is really high. I mean, I guess you have to really, if you really met someone, you know yourself enough. Like, seems like that's maybe like for you, that was the case. You know
Yeah,
yourself
you
enough,
have
you
to have
know her
faith
enough.
and you have to have a certain courage or ability to be vulnerable and take the
Mhm.
chance.
Yeah, right on. Well, do you want to? Anyone else want to jump in? Then it's been maybe like got like an hour, 12 minutes or something. How about you, Sonny? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just to add to what you just said about them being up in your space and not allowing you to do what you want to do. I guess on the flip side, it does teach you to be less selfish and less kind of um, personal with everything, with your desires and um, your needs, and to take into account that there is somebody else there, and sometimes you have to just accept that um, to do things for the greater good of the group. And for me, when that's happened, initially, you feel those emotions arise. I don't want to do that. I want to stay here and meditate. I want to stay here and read this or do my own thing. But once you go out and do it and cater for the other person, um, for me, like it always feels like that was the right thing to do, and you feel better for it. It's a kind of yoga. Um, so there is that element too. Um, Obviously, it can't all be one sided, but I think there's a difference between codependency and having a partnership with someone. I think they're two
Hmm.
very different things. I think in today's society, like um, not in all cases, but for most people, like a partnership is important in order to really have a stable ground, um, to have some kind of stability in the West. So I'll
One
just
thing I
finish. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do want to add to that is just I really don't think you can actually be in a good relationship unless you are an alpha dude. I feel like it's almost mandatory because I feel like what is masculine and female nature, in order for that to work, there has to be someone who has strength on the side of the man, can lead and all this stuff, and they're all alpha qualities. And the rest of the time, I think you have just a lot of guys that are just these, you know, NPCs that are just going around doing life, beta, just aren't aware to anything, don't really think for themselves, and I mean, that's the norm. So I wonder how much of that is just because of that dichotomy. I mean, I think that becoming a warrior, becoming strong, all these are almost like prerequisites for being able to really be able to have even a strong relationship in which you can play the alpha masculine role, which I think is the best role to play if you're going to be in a relationship. But I get it. There's personality in there too. It's not so black and white, but yeah.
I want to be
One
like
advantage of a relationship is it just reduces the idea of I, me, mine. When you've got to take into consideration another person, like let's say one of your parents gets dementia, God forbid, but still, I mean, it's like your duty, and that just becomes your dharma. That becomes your spiritual practice to set aside your own preferences and your own desires in order to do your duty by your aging parent. And I mean, to some degree, I mean, it's should be more positive than that with a loving relationship, but yeah, to some degree, just downplaying the I, me, mine and the personal preferences is a spiritual practice. So there's that too.
Mm.
I was just thinking as well. I'm going to diverge a little bit. I think that men like, and I'm thinking of particularly maybe ancient Greece or somewhere like that, where men have a duty to the civilization that they live in, and they require time for this. They require time maybe for military matters, political matters, and achieving things. If you're henpecked and you're going to the shops with your wife and helping her choose dresses, or going to her, or placating her obsession with social engagements, as many of them have these days, as a dude, you're not going to achieve anything because you're going to be dominated and you're going to have no time to do anything. So I'm a strong believer in actually being quite separate, or interdependent is maybe a good way to put it. And I know what you're saying, Manu, because there's other things you want to achieve in life, right? Like you don't just want to just sit around in a relationship. I think it's just pretty boring, and a lot of women want you to do that. I've noticed, because you fit into their frame of how they want to live, and that's just not going to work for
I mean,
most men.
there's so much money.
Yeah,
It's the materialism. It's like they want to go here, want to go there, do all this stuff,
100%.
empty
Yeah,
vacations. They want a nice house. Even with my ex, I remember we got into a really big argument about houses and like what our goal was, and she was like, "Oh no, I want like a giant mansion with all this stuff," and
yeah,
it's like, so you want me to work
yeah,
all the time forever so you can have
yeah,
all this luxury stuff, even though I mean it doesn't interest me at all. And that was basically like, yes, because that's what I deserve because I'm so beautiful. And it's just like, fair
yeah,
enough, someone might probably marry you that does have money and will do that, so I can't really blame you on one level, but it's just like,
yeah,
it to me, it's so distasteful. It's like I don't want to be that guy. I want a beautiful woman, but if it takes, you know, dedicating my whole life to this pursuit of money, and I can't have any freedom, then it's not worth it to me at all.
yeah. I agree. It comes down to money, but it's also just, for me, it's time. Like, I'd like to be one of those English
Mhm.
naturalists back in the 18th century or something. It's like, you go over there with the kids and I'll just stay in my study and do stuff, and we'll meet up maybe a few times a day or something. And like, I
Mhm.
really honestly feel like it's a pretty good model.
Or
If
Darwin
it just
would poke his little
maybe not,
kids with his finger until they
yeah,
started crying,
well,
and then he
and
would
maybe not,
carefully record the number of muscle contractions when they started crying in their face.
right. That's quite autistic. Yeah, and maybe not marrying my cousin like he did either. That's crippling autism right there. But you know what I'm saying, right? You gotta have a co-interdependent setup if you're a guy. And I can't speak for women, I don't know. But yeah, if you don't have that, if you're just henpecked, you're going to the shops, you're buying mansions, you're just working some shitty corporate job so you can walk around like a piggy bank for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
Or even the thing is, and the other side of this is like, women go to work obviously to make their money, and then they just still want someone richer. So all the smart women, even if they're smart, go do all that, then they're still not happy because you have to make as much, if not more. But a lot of the jobs too are very femme centric. It's a lot of like sit in the office, keep your mouth shut, do your paperwork, and it's like that's not gonna,
No,
you know,
100%. The corporate world is miserable now. Miserable. It's
yeah,
awful, just in so many ways. And for that reason, it's just, you feel like an infant. Just the activities and everything. It's
oh yeah,
awful,
yeah, for
awful.
sure.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add anything before we kind of conclude?
Just to say, I think next time we would benefit from a female perspective as
Yeah,
well.
Julie
I agree.
has a baby shower. Remember, she we'll have to see. We'll
Yeah,
get some
an
women on.
urgent baby shower.
We're gonna do we start doing like a fresh and fit thing. You guys know that where we got a bunch of strippers and stuff. We can talk about it. We'll have them on one side, see what they say. But nah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've talked to this. I think because my parents are divorced. I mean, I've talked about this with so many people. It's been such a you know a hobby almost to try to figure this out. And so, yeah, I always really enjoy discussing these types of topics.
Well, I hope
Yeah.
you find the right girl.
You're gonna find her for me, Panno.
Oh,
That's
great.
you're on my hope. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go. I'll go there where you are. I'll try to. I think because my birthday. Hopefully, I can make it out and we'll hit the clubs or something. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. I don't think you're gonna find the right girl in hitting the clubs, man.
Oh man,
Maybe maybe an ashram or something you could find the right girl.
Mega
maybe
church.
ashram girl. I don't even know if there are really ashrams. I don't even know any ashrams really. I guess there's some in India, but I mean, even in America, I feel like a lot of that died out or it's weird. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's the path. But yeah, awesome guys. Well, thank you, and it's been interesting. So next one, I believe we're doing it on evil, discussing evil, correct?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, we'll put out that soon. And yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and maybe I'll be happy, peaceful, and liberated.